Let's examine the properties of real numbers. We're going to be looking at 5 different properties of numbers, the first of which is the commutative property. Now, the commutative property says that it doesn't matter the order that you add or multiply numbers together, you're going to get the same result. So in other words, you switch positions in the number. A plus B is the same as B plus A. A times B is the same as B times A. So when you're dealing with commutative property, you're just saying, hey, if I have 5 plus 3, it's the same as saying 3 plus 5. I get the same result. Same if I do 5 times 3, which is 15, it's the same as doing 3 times 5, which is 15. So it doesn't matter the order that you add or multiply numbers together, it's the same result. The numbers switch positions. To distinguish between whether it's for addition or multiplication with the commutative property, you look at what do you switch positions around. So if I look at 3x plus 7 is the same as 7 plus 3x, I see the 7 and the 3x change spots around a plus sign. So that's the commutative property of addition. The 2 times 7b is equal to 7b times 2. The 2 and 7b switch positions around multiplication. So therefore, it's the commutative property of multiplication. Now, what's interesting is the commutative property only holds for addition and multiplication. It does not hold for our subtraction or division. If you were to do 5 minus 3, you would get 2. If you were to do 3 minus 5, you get negative 2. So thus, they're not the same. It's the same with division. If I were to do 8 divided by 2, I would get 4. But if I were to do 2 divided by 8, I would get 1/4. So it's important to note that the commutative property only holds, is only true for addition and multiplication. The next property we'll be looking at is our associative property. The associative property deals with kind of the idea of how do you associate. And in mathematics, we associate numbers together with our grouping symbols, with either parentheses or brackets. So for the associative property, what happens is the parentheses moves to group a different set of numbers together. So for the associative property of addition, if I look at the example down here, 15 plus the parentheses 4 plus 8 is equal to, now my parentheses is around the 15 plus 4, and the plus 8 is outside. So my parentheses moved and grouped a different set of numbers together. The same with the 8x times the bracket 5y and 9. Now the brackets move between, it's the 8x and the 5y, and the 9's on the outside. So when your parentheses, your grouping symbols move, they group a different set of numbers together, they're associating with different numbers. So that's the associative property. Next, we have the identity property. You think of the word identity, it means who you are, you stay the same. So for the identity property of addition, in order to keep a number the same, you have to add 0 to it. For the identity property of multiplication, in order to keep the numbers the same, you multiply by 1. So when you're adding 0 by a number, it doesn't change its value. That's the identity property. When you're multiplying a number by 1, it doesn't change its value. That is the identity property of multiplication. The fourth one we'll be examining is the inverse property. Now, for inverse property of addition, think of the word opposite. For the inverse property of addition, you want the value to be equal to 0 with the numbers you use. So the opposite of A is negative A. The opposite of 8 is negative 8. So when you're doing the inverse property of addition, the sum of the two numbers is going to equal 0. That's not the same as the inverse property of multiplication. You're not going to be dealing with the negative number because now you're dealing with multiplying. For the inverse property of multiplication, you think of the reciprocal, which the basic word for reciprocal means flip the number, flip the fraction that you have. So if I have A, then my reciprocal is 1/8. If I have 5, my reciprocal is 1/5. Just like how for the inverse property of addition, your sum of the two numbers are going to be 0. For the inverse property of multiplication, your product of the two numbers is always going to be equal to 1. The last property we'll be examining is the distributive property. It's important to note here as well, you do not have distributive property of multiplication, distributive property of addition like we had in the other ones. The reason why is because the distributive property actually takes the idea of merging the two together. you can multiply into parentheses and then perform the addition or subtraction operation inside of there. So if I take the 5 times 2x, I get 10x, and then I would distribute the 5 to the 3 and get 15. Now, it doesn't matter which position the number on the outside is, if it's on the left of the parentheses or on this one on the right of the parentheses, you can still distribute in 2 times 3y is 6y, and 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So these are our properties of numbers that we're examining. We have the commutative property, which dealt with switching positions, the associative property, which dealt with changing how we group numbers together, the identity property, how values stay the same when you're doing addition, subtraction, the inverse property, the opposite for addition, the reciprocal for multiplication, and the distributive property.